Chapter 9. Splintering Reflections. Prudence paused before the archway that separated the yard from the path that led uphill. It was overrun with cerasee vines, dotted with yellow blooms that attracted bees and hummingbirds. There were also clusters of tiny red fruit that waited to be picked. As she lifted her foot to move forward, something orange moved among the canopy of tiny green cerasee leaves. She tightened her head scarf, donned her glasses and strained towards the archway to study the orange thing. She didn't want to be surprised by a centipede losing its balance and falling onto her head. When she was a child, she'd seen a massive centipede cavorting through the vines of the cerasee plant that had covered the back wall of their house. For a long time, she hadn't slept comfortably in that house. As she watched, the orange thing loosened from the cluster of leaves and floated towards her, a dried leaf, dislodged by the wind. She shook her head and smiled, then planted one foot after the other and continued her journey. As she passed under the archway, she picked a few of the red fruit, bit into them one by one and sucked on the sweet seeds inside. She enjoyed cerasee as much as Constance did. Though she wasn't sure if it actually worked, she'd used it to purge her blood from time to time. Her parents had used it and their parents had also used it for that purpose. Old wives' tale or not, except for the bitterness, it had never hurt her. But if she'd had her way, she would have chopped down some of it. The narrow path along which she walked was fringed with greenery, except for the red blooms from the hibiscus shrubbery that lined the left side of the path and the carpet of pink petals from the June rose plant that hugged the right side of the hill. She squashed the pink petals, releasing their fragrance, which followed her as she charted a tight course uphill. As she tramped along, she slashed at errant shrubs that overhung the track. To the left of the track, where there was a break in the hedging, the land sloped downward to the spring. She passed coconut, cocoa, star apple, mango, apple, mahogany, and cedar trees. Her father, Mas Rufus, had planted most of them and nature had planted the rest. She reached the top of that hill. Below her, her massive pink house clung to the side of the hill, its shiny roof glistening in the sunshine. Constance's cotton candy-colored house, partially hidden by tall green-bladed grass, stood in front of her. "It would remind us of where we're coming from if Constance lived there," she said with a wry smile. "Leave her good house for spiders and God only knows what else." She turned away from Constance's house to the plot where her house should have been. She slashed at the roots of the perennial wild ginger that had overrun much of that area. As soon as she started to clear the ground, the fowls appeared to gobble up the creatures that she shook out of the bush and released from the earth. She'd have to worry about keeping them from eating the seeds that she would sow. She would ask John to build a fence around the cleared plot and cover it with mesh. She'd never tried to grow cabbage and carrot before. Those were the new crops with which she hoped that she would have success. Prudence liked to plant her own food. When she did, she was certain of what she was eating. When she was growing up, she hadn't seen her father using any fertilizer and the things he'd planted in the gully had thrived. Big bunches of bananas, big cocoa and dashins, big yams, tomatoes, peppers, all those things grow without any fertilizer. Today, everybody want fertilizer. They killing us off. People have all kinds of sickness nowadays. Nothing but the food they eating. Prudence talked as she worked, the bush around her and the fowls that had found her, her audience. As she talked, she slashed through the wild ginger and dug the roots out of the earth and tossed them into the bush at the edge of the clearing. It was not a difficult job. The earth was still damp from the days of rain that they'd had. Pess, 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 pess. She froze, her back bent, her machete in midair. What was that? Snake. Pess, 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 pess. Prudence dropped the machete and sprinted to the path. She hated snakes, not that she'd seen any of them up close. She just didn't like large, squirming things. Constance was right, she thought. One day, you going to find what you looking for in that bush. Every day you gone to chop. Get somebody to plant what you want. When snake come out on you, you will get what you looking for, she'd often told her. Prudence jogged down the path, but the sound followed her. Before she could let loose a scream, the vibration in the pocket of her pants caught her attention. She stopped. It was from there that the insistent, sibilant whisper was coming. Her phone. I must have touched something on this blasted phone again. I need to ask one of the young people to fix it. All kind of trials I have to face. If it is not Constance, it is something else. Look how I nearly run and kill myself because of stupidity. By the time Prudence tried to answer the phone, the vibration had stopped. She leaned against the mango tree under which she'd stopped and studied the phone. She didn't understand much about phones, except how to answer them. Am I really fool? Running from my own phone because Constance put stupidity in my head. A giggle escaped her, then it morphed into a chuckle. And then into a full-blown guffaw. Prudence laughed until she was breathless. Every time she saw herself running, she laughed some more. She eventually calmed herself and looked across the hillside in all directions. She didn't see anybody. They see me running and decide to call me names. Wonder what they would call me, she mused, chuckling. At her stage of life, she didn't want any other name, except the one that her parents had given her. She raised her glasses to her face and allowed her eyes to wander over the hillside and down into the valley. To her left, the village square was almost empty, as usual, except for a few boys who sat on the tombs closest to the road. Beyond them, the greyish-white structure of the Anglican church stood, imposing, among the tombs. And at the top of the cemetery, the empty, winding, brown track sliced through the forested hill that seemed to be touching the sky. Her eyes returned to the main road and followed it as it ran alongside the wall of the churchyard, down to the bridge that spanned the river and disappeared beyond her view. Straight ahead, the roof of the school glinted through the leaves of the coconut trees. The playfield with its newly rolled cricket pitch hugged the bank of the river where a few goats loitered. Her eyes scanned the hill above the playfield where there were a few clearings, dotted with banana trees and, above them, larger trees with outstretched branches that seemed to be embracing everything under their shadows. She'd spent many days with her parents on that hillside. She shook out her legs. She didn't know that she could run. She'd returned home from Canada in a wheelchair 5 years before. Her joints had been stiff and her feet had been swollen. John had carried her on his back when she'd returned home for the last time. He'd helped Constance to settle her into one of the guest rooms downstairs. Her range of movements had involved turning her head from left to right. She hadn't wanted to be beholden to anybody, worse Constance. Constance was getting up in age, just like her, she'd told herself, and she hadn't wanted to put any undue stress on her. That first night after Constance had tidied her, she'd lain in bed wondering how she was going to manage and how long she would live. But Constance had been a rock to her. She'd got her back on her feet without complaining once. Prudence squeezed out a smile. Constance has her ways, but she is a good sister, she said, most of the times. She raised her eyes to the heavens and glimpsed the blue sky through the green leaves of the mango tree. She willed the yellow mango above her to fall. It swayed in the wind, tempting her. She used the long bamboo stick that was leaning on the mango tree to try to snag the mango. After a few attempts, she succeeded. It fell into the grass beside her. She used some leaves of nearby plants to wipe it clean, then bit into its succulent sweetness. She'd only had a cup of tea that morning. The deep yellow juice of the common mango smeared her fingers. She attempted to lick them but forgot that she was chewing on the peel of the mango. She worked hard to tamp down the swear words that ran to the forefront of her mind as the pain from her forefinger consumed her body. She transferred the mango to her left hand and tried to flash out the pain in her right forefinger. The red spot, visible through the nail of her forefinger, marked the spot where her teeth had sunk. Damn, damn, damn. You need to focus, she scolded herself. Look how you nearly bite off your finger. She looked at the mango, then at the bush around her. I have a good mind to throw you down there, she said, and flexed the bruised forefinger before she continued to eat her mango. She'd been outside since 5:30 a.m. Constance snapping at her that morning had strengthened her resolve to stay out of her way. She felt like she was a guest in Constance's home, instead of the occupant of her own home. After she'd recovered from her illness and had begun to move around, Constance had grown increasingly grouchy. Put that back how you see it. That's not what I cooking for dinner, keep the door closed. She had all kinds of rules that she expected Prudence to follow. Prudence had tried to stamp her authority on her home, But after a few years, she'd realized that she was fighting a losing battle. So, she'd allowed Constance to do whatever she wanted to do, most of the times. Before she'd finally returned home, she had visited a number of times and Constance had treated her well all those times. She'd done all the cooking and the laundry and hadn't wanted her to help with anything. Just relax, she'd always told her. You are on vacation. Even though she hadn't felt comfortable relaxing and allowing Constance to do all the work, she'd stopped resisting. Constance had had the run of the house for the 10 years before she'd moved back to Jamaica. It probably was more Constance's house than hers, at least in her mind, Prudence thought. When Prudence returned to the house that afternoon, the scent of the Saturday soup enveloped her. It was then that she realized how hungry she was. Just in time for dinner, a voice from above her head said. Prudence raised her head from the pan of water that she was using to wash the dirt from her machete. Constance was smiling.